Welcome to the CEC Report. It's the 22nd of November. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm with CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, Australia's spying crisis is a legacy of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And hockey is frantically preparing for a financial crash he can't talk about. So first, Australia's spying crisis is the legacy of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And Craig, today, it's 22nd of November, is the 50th anniversary of Kennedy's assassination in Dallas. Now, there's going to be a lot of coverage of that.
There already is, Robert.
There already is. Most of it is going to be soap opera-ish, right? You know, the whole focus on Camelot and the trophy wife and the affairs and all that type of rubbish. However, that's not why Kennedy was killed. There's a reason why Kennedy was killed. There was a reason that powerful forces wanted him out of the way. And we want to touch on that a little bit today. Before I do that, I do want to have a little mini promotion here, which people can look this up on the internet, on our websites and other LaRouche PAC websites. Executive Intelligence Review, the magazine founded by Lyndon LaRouche in the 1970s, which is
this one here.
That one there.
Yeah.
It really is the finest private intelligence service in the world. They've recently published 2 features relating to this. Now, this week's edition reruns some excellent work by historian Anton Chaikin from 1994 called "Why the British Kill American Presidents." And it really is. If you want to cut through all the magic bullet stuff, which sort of drowns out the question of motive, and actually look at the key players involved, that documents it thoroughly. It doesn't, and not just in the case of Kennedy, but this phenomena in America of American presidents getting assassinated, right, and what's in it for the British Empire. And a few months ago, Anton Chaikin published some new research that he did in anticipation of this anniversary, called John F. Kennedy versus the Empire. And what that goes through is the career that Kennedy had been on, what he personally did as a congressman and then as a president to acquaint himself with the state of the world, how things stood in that regard. He didn't want to just go along with the people pushing the Cold War agenda, i.e. that, the Soviets were all bad, therefore we have to justify all manner of building up of nuclear arsenals and weaponry, etc., so we can blow the hell out of the world if we have to, because we have this Soviet boogeyman, right? He wanted to make sure that calmer heads prevailed. And in doing so, he came face to face with the British Empire, because the British Empire was trying to maintain its hegemony. And of course, Winston Churchill had started the Cold War effectively. He was very influential over Harry Truman. And the Cold War was keeping America and Russia divided like that was a key British strategy. And Kennedy ran up against that. He ran up against it not just in the large, but in the small, in terms of the way, I'll give you one example. He opposed the Dutch when the Dutch were trying to assert colonial control over Indonesia, over the East Indies, because he took the Roosevelt position. The Dutch were...
Well, I was just about to say that, Robbie, because look, Kennedy was about to take more just in that particular issue, the whole Roosevelt outlook.
Yep.
And look what happened. You look what Roosevelt did. Look at his ideas towards the British Empire were his hostility towards Churchill. Well, JFK was, according to Eleanor Roosevelt, I believe,
Yep.
about to take that line of thinking, or was involved in that line of thinking already, and was going to extend it, which meant what? More promoting the idea of the sovereignty and the economic development of the United States, as seen in the space program, for example.
The sovereignty of the United States, but the sovereignty of all nations. That's the dividing line. You know, Roosevelt was the last great champion, and Kennedy, of you have a world of sovereign nation states where the interaction is mutual collaboration, right?
Yeah.
The British view, which is globalization today, is that another power, an overarching power, can dictate how nations run their affairs, right? That's the dividing line, and that broadly covers why it happened, but these 2 documents go through that. So I really encourage viewers to look them up. But we want to focus on something else today, because it struck me, Craig, that this anniversary has come just at a time when it's sort of built up in the last few days, but we find ourselves in Australia in the middle of one of the most serious foreign affairs crises we've ever had, right?
And it sort of drowns out the importance of JFK, and that would be quite lawful, Rob, really. As you're saying, I mean, here there's a lot of affinity for Australians for JFK, and the excitement of the moon landings and all of that, was always reflected back to what JFK did. And consequently, what are we getting now is this hideous, disgusting, revelations about the Australians spying on the Cecilio Bang Bang Udiono.
And it turns out both, despite 50 years apart, both events are connected. Now, you can look up, and we will provide the links, and we put out a release on this today, Craig. LaRouche Pack, our associates in America, recently did an interview with former Congressman Neil Gallagher. Now, he's a 92-year-old. He was a close friend and ally of John F. Kennedy. He's a Democrat from New Jersey. LaRouche Pack called the interview a profile in courage. And this is their blurb. Neil Gallagher is the only man alive who not only was a close personal friend of John F. Kennedy, but fought the apparatus associated with the assassinations of JFK, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. And as a member of Congress, miraculously he was able to continue fighting, unlike others who joined him in the struggle. Even more miraculous, he is still alive today to tell of it. Here at 92 years old, former Congressman Neil Gallagher presents to you his story. And the interview goes for 100 minutes. People should watch this. This is history. LaRouche Pack has done a remarkable job getting Gallagher to put down to record for history what he went through, and the details are very shocking. He focuses on the internal security apparatus that J. Edgar Hoover set up in the United States under the cover of the Cold War, and this was this terrorizing spy operation through the FBI that's infiltrated every corner of American society. And Gallagher was already on to how this was expanding. Gallagher, had been part of the resistance to the McCarthy witch hunt era, etc., in the 50s. So when he got news of Kennedy's death, when he saw how quickly the FBI rounded up Lee Harvey Oswald, and the news came out that Oswald was already known to the FBI, Gallagher was instantly suspicious that Oswald was in fact an FBI asset, because that is how they operated. And I'll say to Craig, there's a parallel today with these sting operations around terrorism in the United States, where the FBI will announce it's made an arrest of someone about to do a terrorist attack, when they might have been, but all their thinking for doing it and all the help to do it came from the FBI as part of the sting operation to set them up. Right? This is and there's no rationale behind that kind of behaviour at all. But this is this sort of apparatus out of control.
It's a police state apparatus.
It is a police state apparatus. So this guy Gallagher, he spent the rest of his career fighting this. He fought the spying and the blackmail that Hoover used against elected officials, against ordinary citizens, and the whole intention of this was to corrupt the democratic process, because they broke the link between elected officials and their voters, so that you still voted for them, but once they're in there, they knew that they were not that the idea of answering to the public came second to the idea that they're part of a system now that they cannot afford to buck, because all kinds of
that sounds like our parliamentary system, Robbie, a two-party system.
Well,
but it's much worse, of course.
Craig. You have to ask that question. And when you say much worse, let me just make this point from Gallagher. He calls his word term for this is the secret government. When you have a secret government, then you don't have any real democracy. It makes a joke of democracy. On the 26th of October, a few weeks after he recorded this interview with LaRouche Pack, he attended an event that Lyndon LaRouche was also present at, and Gallagher made the point that this apparatus, which today is centred in the National Security Agency, which is where all these revelations have come out about this enormous global spying network, this is 10,000 times worse than what he was fighting in the 1960s. So you don't have a single, monster type person like J. Edgar Hoover anymore, but the total apparatus is even worse.
Multiple heads, yeah.
And that, of course, brings us to this spying in Indonesia, because the spying, there's a con that's been deliberately peddled. We weren't spying on Indonesia and on the president and the president's wife's personal mobile phone calls for our national interest. The spying that Australia has been doing is part of a global apparatus called the Five Eyes Alliance. And we've discussed this in recent weeks, Craig. That's the United States and its NSA crowd, Britain and its GCHQ, and then the three other members are Canada, Australia and New Zealand, the Five Eyes. And as we've pointed out, 4 of those 5 countries have the Queen as the head of state. The British spy network is much older, much more experienced and much more established than the American one. The Americans are actually latecomers to this. This is the influence it's not that America's taken over the world, it's the British system has taken over the United States. This is the empire today, right? And this is the power structure that sits above governments. It has no respect for national sovereignty, as we've discussed, and the way it seeks to dominate is through manipulation and wars. So, Craig, here's the question for you. I'd like to ask you this in a sense on behalf of the country, because what does it mean for Australia's future, where we live in a part of the world that, while the rest of the transatlantic economies are actually collapsing, they're into bankruptcy. The part of the world we live in, thank goodness, is developing, it's going ahead. These countries, our Asian neighbours are reaching out to us for collaboration about economic development. What does it mean for our future in that if we stick with this empire's spying apparatus?
Well, Robbie, we put out 2 newspapers last year and early this year about this topic from the point of view of that the Asian region is a focal point for another world war. So all of Obama's policies are focused on trying to contain China, right? Trying to stop China from developing. As you just said, this whole region is rapidly developing. It's not like the transatlantic area, which is collapsing under the weight of all the speculation of the banking system falling apart. So what does it mean if we're here you have our most populous neighbour, Indonesia, right, and we're acting on behalf of the empire, keeping an eye on them, spying on them. There's no way that can be considered as part of a policy for the future stability and security of our country. It simply isn't. The intention, as we've said, is Obama intends to try and contain China on behalf of the British again. This is about the fact that the Chinese have a concept of sovereignty. They fight fiercely, like with Russia, for national sovereignty. That's shared by a number of nations, including Indonesia. So what do we come along? Smash the sovereignty. Why? It's because we actually aren't. Now, this is a real shock to people. We aren't a sovereign nation. We are a country that has a foreign power called the Queen governing it through the Privy Council and through the private banking system. All this is on the public record. So
and enshrined in the Constitution. It's not a secret.
Our Constitution was given to us by the British Foreign Office back in the turn of the previous century. And the point is that we've never ever become actually a sovereign nation. Now we sort of feign that. We're somewhat autonomous, but there's a big difference between being autonomous and actually being sovereign. And this is where Australia is at risk severely if we keep just peddling this British line, being part of the Five Eyes Alliance, spying on our most important neighbours, and literally wrecking the capability of economic collaboration with our fastest growing country called China.
And Craig, there's an element where Australians have sort of been induced into the mentality that we're a big continent but a little country population-wise. So whatever we might think personally, we have to have these alliances with powerful countries. Traditionally Britain, most people tend to see America as more dominant now, but we see America as just an agent for Britain. And therefore, what can we really do? We've got to go along with that. Whereas one thing, when you know the JFK history, which is why people should read these documents, is inside America, there are people that, even to this day, which is why we work with LaRouche, right, that are just as fiercely still fighting for the principle of national sovereignty as we would like to aspire to, so therefore you can't just give up and say, oh, there's nothing we can do. No, we've got to fight here and work with people fighting similarly over there, because then we can accomplish this.
Yeah.
All right. we've run out of time. We've gone a bit overboard on that. When we come back, we're going to talk about Joe Hockey. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Hockey is frantically preparing for a financial crash he can't talk about. There's a huge fight in Parliament this week, Craig, over Joe Hockey's rather shocking demand to raise the debt ceiling to $500 billion. Now, the opposition is insisting, well, if you want this money, show us the projections, the paperwork, because the last announced projections say that debt will go to just below $400 billion, so why don't we just raise the debt ceiling to that? You know, justify why you want $500 billion.
Well, it's an interesting argument they put up, Robbie, and it's quite a good one. Okay, we've got to increase the debt ceiling. Well, why not take it up to, say, $300 billion, then come back to us when you want to do it again? Therein lies the rub.
That's
right. Why not?
Well, and Hockey's refusing to put out any paperwork, right? Why? Well, this is the point that he can't. Because to be honest with what he wants, he has to say, because I know the system's coming down and the government's going to be called on in a heartbeat to put out a lot of money to keep it propped up. That's actually the truth, which he can't say, because remember, he announced this straight after coming back from a visit to Wall Street where he met with JP Morgan. And the only giveaway he's given is he's saying, oh, we need headroom, i.e. a contingency, right? He clearly knows something big is coming. Okay. Another thing he's doing, he has just appointed this week the former head of the Commonwealth Bank and Future Fund, David Murray, to head up his new financial systems inquiry, which he calls the Son of Wallace. And incidentally, Craig, when they were talking about setting this up, a lot of the commentary was, oh, we don't want a banker in charge, we want an industrialist, so it's someone who's a little bit one step removed from the bankers. Well, no, this is for the bankers, and there's a banker in charge, David Murray. They've made it clear, how's this, one of its major considerations will be, quote, how the financial system can more efficiently allocate Australian source capital to minimise our exposure to volatility in global capital markets. That means we have to reduce how much Australia's banks are dependent on foreign borrowings.
And that's something like $500+ billion turned over every 180 days, Robbie. It's huge.
And what did that dependence on foreign borrowings do to our banks in 2008?
It blew them out.
That's what made them bankrupt. Our banks were bankrupt in 2008 because if you're used to living on a credit card, not on income but on a credit card, and then one day the your credit cards declined. That's what happened in October 2008. You got no money. What are you? You're bankrupt, right? And that's what happened, and the Rudd government stepped in with the guarantees. That's one of two major vulnerabilities in our banking system, the other one being derivatives. And that's what Hockey wants this to address. So that, again, is panic. And the third thing, it's just announced this morning, the Productivity Commission has just announced it's looking into raising the retirement age to 70. Now, Craig, we've been warned to expect it to be raised to 67. I think that's on the books. But as someone pointed out to me, that when Wayne Swan was Treasurer and announced that it was going to be 67, he had a slip of the tongue at the time, and he said, oh, it's going to be 71, and then he had to backpedal later, oh no, I meant 67. Well, now the Productivity Commission is announcing we're going to raise it to 70. Why? Because all workers depend on superannuation. The super is got nothing to do with retirements, as we've always said. It's about bailing out the financial systems now. So if by the time they get to retire at 65, there's not going to be enough super for them because their money's in a casino. So what they want to do is extend the age by 5 years to 70, so that there's 5 more years to milk money out of workers' wages, right, and put off 5 years when they're going to try and take it out of the system. These are the things they're doing. We are going to have to. I'll tell you what we'll do, Craig. We've run out of time. When we come back, we're going to talk about our response to this, because we've got some big news to announce.
Yes.
Welcome back to the CEC Report. So before the break, we were talking about how Joe Hockey is frantically preparing for a financial crash that he can't talk about. Well, the CEC, Craig, is also preparing for the financial crash, which we can talk about.
Yes.
So we've been fighting very, very hard for the last period against this bail-in agenda that is coming down the pipe, which Obviously, hockey's financial systems inquiry will include that as part of it. But we've got a few things to update the viewers on because we've got some big developments coming up very soon, right? So just announce what's going to happen
Well,
next.
this program, Robbie, will go to air just before we actually have an advertisement in the Australian on the 3rd of December. Now, this is going to include hundreds.
A full-page ad.
A full-page ad in the Australian with hundreds of signers to our call for the Australian Parliament not to endorse bail-in, but to go with Glass-Steagall. Now, we've been on this mobilisation for quite some time now, and these people that have signed this have said, we don't want bail-in. We need the solution to Glass-Steagall because, look, the intention is to steal people's deposits. Yep. It's been stated by the Financial Stability Board that legislation's in train. There's been research going on in all the different financial departments, the Treasury, ASIC, APRA and so forth, to bring this policy in. Australia is the chair of the G20 this year. The head of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has said that he wants all these legislations, who's also the chair of the Financial Stability Board, he wants this legislation in place by the time we get to November when we have a G20 meeting here in Australia.
Brisbane, yep.
So the point is...
And the Australian reported the other day, the ratings agencies are treating our banks as if bail-in is already a reality.
So the problem we've got is that apart from that comment in the Australian, there's been no talk in any of the media, any of the press whatsoever about this policy of bail-in. We're blowing the lid on this. We've also put together for continuing our mobilisation, we're putting together two pamphlets. One is to go through the idea of legislation for Glass-Steagall, how that's going to work. And in particular, we've got a separate pamphlet, which is actually the legislation for a national bank. So we've got these two pieces of information that are going to be available to actually campaign to get Glass-Steagall legislated for in our parliament.
Because after the ad, Craig, this is the CEC's focus, and we're inviting everyone to participate in this.
There is nothing else to do.
We have to get this legislation passed.
Yeah, because
we're very specific.
Hockey's talking about a global financial crisis indirectly. Yeah, the headroom idea.
He's acting about a global financial crisis.
He's acting on it, right? And the problem is that if you look at an iceberg, you only ever see the top 10th, yep. Robbie. Well, I think we can only see the top 1% of this financial crisis iceberg. Everyone's being brainwashed to think everything is okay. The wise people, they can smell something's wrong. Well, the solution is to go with Glass-Steagall. Yep. It's not complicated legislation.
No.
Right? We've got precedents in our own past about how we used to function with a regulated banking system, particularly under the Commonwealth Bank. So what we're putting together is the mechanisms by which our legislators can actually write the legislation, come up with Glass-Steagall and quickly put the banking system out of its misery. What do I mean? We need to have a commercial banking system that's properly regulated, the deposits are protected. That is, the normal business of banking is properly maintained. And all these huge banks that we have, the big four, get broken up. No more insurance houses, stockbroking, merchant banking, investment banking is all in one house. They're all broken up. They're given a short period of time to do that, and literally you basically write off the speculation in derivatives.
Yep.
And the derivative speculation in this country is unbelievable. $23 trillion, Robbie.
It's the cancer that's killing us, and
over-the-counter
derivatives. Cut off.
So that's our program for the future. We'll be talking about a lot more over the next weeks and months because this is the only solution that we have for our country right now.
And if you're a viewer who has not yet endorsed our statement, get on our website, pull it up, you'll see it, endorse it, and you might be in time to have your name included in this full-page advertisement in the Australian newspaper. So that'll be on the 3rd of December. Buy the Australian that day and look for it. But that's it for this week's CEC Report. Thanks, Craig, and thanks for tuning in.